Welcome, welcome, welcome to Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, City Manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. So, thank you for tuning in every Wednesday, 2 p.m. ish, for our show. Thanks for all the comments and uh, concerns and questions that you share with me between shows. I appreciate it. It's always good to know, even if you don't participate in the show by logging on to Facebook Live or the live stream and chatting in the chat, that people are out there listening and find what we are sharing as good information. So today on our show, people are interested in knowing about the roads. The roads. Anybody interested in hearing about the roads? So I've got a number of questions and calls. And so as our guest today, we have Mr. John Allen. Welcome to the show, Mr. Allen.
Thank you.
Good to have you back. In case you don't remember from our previous shows where Mr. Allen has been a guest, he is the Director of Utilities and Public Works. And we will also be welcoming to the show, or back to the show, welcome in Mr. Damon Garrett from Metro Consulting Associates. Welcome, Damon.
Good afternoon to all.
Good afternoon. Yep. Good to have you back. And why don't you share with our audience, in case they didn't catch you the last time, what your title is and your organization. It's across the title there, though.
Okay. Well, like I said, good afternoon, everyone, all the listeners. Good afternoon, Mr. Allen. My name is Damon Garrett, the president of Metro Consulting Associates. We are a land surveying and civil engineering company. We perform a multitude of services: survey, civil engineering, GIS, ecological services. We do construction work as well. We are happy to be on today and add any value that we can as it pertains to the road situation, City of Muskegon Heights.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Metro Consulting Associates is the engineering firm, construction management firm that is handling our Delano Street reconstruction. And so they are also assisting the city with a leak detection grant that they wrote for, and we were successful in getting to identify and address leaks throughout the community and our system. And I believe you're also working on our Department of Natural Resource grants. And I think that's it in the hopper now. So welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you part of the show and talk about your expertise when it comes to road work and road construction. So let us go ahead and get started. So like I said, hot topic, we're coming out of the winter. And when the snow melts and the sun comes out and you get a chance to see the damage that's been done to the roads as a result of salting and plowing and car traffic and the whole like, now everybody's running into all these potholes. And so I really want to get into explaining and sharing with the community what is being done with the potholes specifically. And so I wanted to invite Mr. Allen to talk about the patching process. So I've received a number of phone calls about and questions about, well, these potholes have been here and nobody's done anything about it. And I go back to the list that I get from DPW that talks about places that were patched. And some of the same places that people are complaining about are places that were patched. So if you could share with the public what that is all about and how that comes to happen, that would probably be helpful.
Well, it's again a seasonal process.
Mm-hmm.
This, I guess, we would call pothole season, if you want to call it that.
Right.
Typically, asphalt comes in a couple of different styles. There's what is called cold patch, which is available during the winter season. It is only a temporary repair. And then they have what is called hot patch, which they use for actual road construction, which is a more permanent repair. The hot patch is only available between, say, the end of this month and about the middle of November. The rest of the time, the cold patch is the only thing that is available. And again, that is only designed to be a temporary repair.
And what's the difference between cold patch and hot patch other than cold and
price?
hot? Yeah, well, and which is more expensive?
Well, the cold patch is almost twice as much as
Wow.
as hot patch.
Hmm.
Again, it's designed to, remain softer in the wintertime. It does not have the adhesion of the hot patch, and
Okay.
so again, it's just a temporary repair. And
Hmm.
depending on the circumstance, when we fill the hole, depending on what is, how big the hole is, how much moisture might be in there,
Hmm.
many different factors will determine how long the temporary patch may last.
So let's back up. And why do we have so many potholes in Muskegon Heights?
Well, I mean, Muskegon Heights is an older community, especially relative to its streets.
Hmm.
Average life expectancy of a street, depending on if it's concrete or asphalt, roughly about 20 years or so.
Hmm.
Some of the streets are much older than that here. And just trying to keep up with the older streets, it becomes
Right.
much more of a, as things age, they're just harder to maintain.
So let me think this through. So the life expectancy of a street is anywhere between 20 and 25 years.
Mhm.
If it's not concrete, if it's concrete, a little bit longer,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes you have less than 20 years, sometimes you have more than 25 years. And I want to throw this question out to Mr. Garrett too, because from your engineering expertise, what is the difference between those that last less than 20 years and those that last longer than 25 years?
That's well, that's
Other than the
that you can
crystal
answer
ball.
that. Yeah, you can answer that a couple different ways.
Hmm.
I think John touched on some of that. The existing conditions of the subgrade, the temperature, the area
Hmm.
are things that can impact that. Also, maintenance. If you're not routinely sealing roads, if you maybe you are, but performing the routine maintenance can certainly extend that a little bit. Um,
And
and
what do
but
you mean
once
by
they get to
routine maintenance? What does that mean?
well, so John touched on some of that. Cold patch and
Hmm.
hot patch is
Okay.
maintenance. There's several sealing methods that you can do. You can chip seal, crack seal, micro seal. So those are just putting adhesive down in cracks and sealing it off from moisture. So those things will add a couple years or to the design life. But once you get to a certain, if there are cracks, you get to a certain where moisture is getting into the subgrade. I mean, your road is going to be compromised. So at that point, maintenance really doesn't make a difference. The road's going to start going in the other direction.
So the first line of defense in terms of maintenance is sweeping and cleaning, if I understand that
Mm-hmm.
correctly, so that you don't have pooling of water and oils and such on the surface. And then the second line is where there are breakdowns in the pavement. Then you want to be able to seal those so that that stops it from deteriorating as fast. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's
fair.
Anytime moisture gets into anything, the
Mhm.
freeze and thaw cycle will
Right.
expand and crack it even further. So the
So the
more you
water
can
gets
prevent
down in
that,
there,
yeah,
and when it freezes, water expands, becomes ice, and that creates an even bigger crack. So
correct,
if you can seal it and stop the moisture from getting down in there, then that can help extend the life of the structure.
correct.
Okay. So then you've got the sealing. You said crack seal, crack and seal. What were the other two that you mentioned?
Oh, they were all different forms of sealing. So there's crack seal, there's
Mhm.
micro seal,
Micro
there's chip
seal,
sealing. I mean,
chip seal.
yeah, some of it, most of it is adhesive. Like seal
Mhm.
coating. Applying that in the cracks. You get into micro sealing and micro surfacing. That's adding a little bit of aggregate to the mix, some water. It's kind of like a slurry type of material. So those are
Mhm.
some different maintenance things that if you have access to those, that can help prolong the life of the pavement.
And then if you've got those cracks that have expanded into a pothole, then you want to put the patch in. And again, that's intended to fill the hole, but also stop it from collecting more moisture or water that would then freeze and expand and make the pothole larger, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so,
Yeah. One thing you did say though, Mr. Bell,
mhm,
some people are asking why those same areas reappear.
mhm,
John mentioned the freeze and thaw cycle. So, you fill that hole, but over the period of time, that material starts to kind of disintegrate, right? So you it's conceivable that you can fill a hole. That same hole can become a new hole, over the year of 4 or 5 months. So you can fill it. You can think you're in good condition. You get drive traffic over it, kind of pushes it down, even though if you compact it well. And sometimes, it was completely smooth with the surface. And then over several months, it might be an inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. So it's not a permanent fix, I guess. As John mentioned, it's a temporary fix. So that's how we could fill a hole and it could reappear again in the next season.
Got it. And so, how does the salt affect the asphalt, the salting process? I know we use it to keep the streets from icing, so that you don't have an ice surface. Does that negatively affect the pavement?
Well, again, you're thawing, melting the snow.
Mm-hmm.
You're keeping it in a liquid form, and salt does not prevent it from completely freezing, but it does allow, it keeps the surface wet in the cold weather, and that can be driven down, over time as people are driving on it.
Okay.
And so, if you were to just not salt, obviously, then you have other conditions.
Right.
But keeping it moist at that, with the salt will have a detriment.
Okay.
Sure.
And what about the plowing process? I mean, to me, that's the physical trauma that you're doing to the roads by trying to scrape the snow and the ice, and because it always seems like after we plow, there's more potholes.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, the smoother the surface that you're scraping, the better it'll be. And the more inconsistencies you have in the surface, the harder the plow is going to be on it, because the plow, again, is a rigid piece of steel, and it's going to run across at a straight on a straight line.
Okay.
And any kind of a rise in the surface or whatever, is going to take a little bit of a beating. So,
so that's the physical trauma to the road, and in addition to the road traffic. And what about when we talk about road traffic, heavy vehicles versus light vehicles? Is there a differential there in the way that impacts our streets?
Yeah, I mean, obviously depending on what kind of road traffic, they do have load limits that it may be seasonal because of the base of the road itself. So they limit larger vehicles on certain roads. But again, the size of the vehicle, and again, any kind of a dip in the road, or any kind of as the tire hits it, the heavier the vehicle, a little more of a hammering effect is it, and it will deteriorate. It increases the deterioration.
Okay. And in terms of the design of roads, do we design roads differently based on the perceived load and traffic? Is there a difference in the way that we construct the road to address
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're designing a road, depending on what kind of traffic, you thicken the subgrade. So basically the stone base, what's called the CBR, California Bearing Ratio, and that determines, do we want to have an 8-inch subgrade surface? Do we want to have a 12 or 14? And that depends on how many trips you have on that road, and the weight of those. So, if you have a seasonal road, you have, multi-axle vehicles on that, your subgrade is going to be thicker, like our highways, right? But you have a local street, the subgrade is going to be smaller, so they're not intended to receive that kind of loading. So yes, there is a design process that determines based on the weight of the vehicles, the number of vehicles you're going to have on that road, and then we translate that into how thick our subgrade, which is the surface below what we drive on, how thick that needs to be. So that's kind of how we do that.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that and clarifying that. So going back to the maintenance, in order to extend the life of the roads, you have the street sweeping, you have the crack and seal, you have patching, but at some point in time, eventually the road is going to deteriorate, and ideally that's when you do what is called milling and paving, right?
Yeah. So, John was talking about uneven surfaces, and, as you patch and, you create the surface that has inconsistency. So, the best thing, even if you can saw cut out, a section, 4 or 5, 6 feet to give yourself nice consistent edges and then repave that. And if you need to go on further, then you just do what we call a mill and overlay, which you mill off the existing surface that back down to either one layer down to the base or down to the subgrade, and then you repave. So that's your, I guess, your best band-aid, if you will, outside of reconstructing the road. But it's all about, like John said, consistencies, in that surface. So,
Right.
potholes, you have several potholes or craters, that creates problems. If you can saw cut out good consistent sections, that'll help you. And then ultimately, if you have the budget, you can do the mill and resurfacing. So that would be the preferred route, but that costs a lot more money than sealing roads and potholing.
Right. So if we have the resources to be able to do the sealing, that'll extend the lifetime. But at some point, if it regardless of what you do, there's going to be a point at which you're looking at milling and paving. Now, you mentioned reconstruction. What's the difference between, John? What's the difference between reconstruction and milling and paving?
Well, I mean, reconstruction, again, you redo the entire base,
Mm-hmm.
curb, gutter, everything else, whereas
Mm-hmm.
the milling would be just milling the surface itself, making some curb repair or whatever if necessary, and then
Mm-hmm.
just resurfacing with the asphalt.
So you're taking off all the asphalt, you're taking off the subgrade, which is the rock and the dirt underneath, and redoing that whole surface, subsurface, and then coming back with new pavement over top.
Correct.
All right. And so I'm guessing the reconstruction, from the experience that I've had, is inordinately more expensive than the milling and paving process, right?
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, about 2 times as much. I mean, to do it all over, because you've got to address curb, spot repairs, or total all new curb. Sometimes drainage structures need to be replaced, so it's quite an experience to do reconstructing. But I mean, you get to 25 years, you figure every road is going to get to that point where you need to reconstruct it. So there's a life cycle, is the maintenance, and then you get to maybe 5 years, 10 years into that road, then you want to kind of mill and overlay, and then ultimately you have a reconstruct, and you try to cycle all the roads such that they're not all happening at the same time, that you can kind of have some are in the resurfacing, some are in the reconstruction, and then they're all should be in the maintenance cycle all the time. So that's kind of how we would approach, like trying to keep us from having to do everything at once.
So how do you decide when a road needs to be reconstructed versus milling and overlay?
So you probably you go out and you conduct a PACER rating, which is a pavement surface evaluation rating, and you rate the roads from 9 to 0, excellent condition to poor condition, and the roads that are in, let's say, fair to excellent condition, probably routine maintenance would be good for a number of years. Things that are below 5, you start getting to 3, which is poor, and you get into 0, which is fail. Obviously, those roads would be roads that you want to reconstruct. So that's kind of the engineer's roadmap of how we determine what we want to do is with the PACER evaluation.
Okay, and what would constitute a 0, 1, 2, or 3?
So you're going to get into block cracking, alligator cracking, fatigue. These are all asphalt terms, but like block cracking are large blocks where you can see distress in the pavement. You've got rutting, where you can see where there's the travel path and it's kind of inundated. So those kinds of indicators are letting you know that there's some compromised subgrade, that the surface has failed, and that you're moving towards a reconstruction scenario.
Okay. So, John, you've had a chance to look at the PACER rating for the city of Muskegon Heights, and I think you probably have as well, Mr. Garrett. What are the PACER ratings, the majority of the PACER ratings that you see for the city of Muskegon Heights?
Poor, unfortunately.
Between the 0 and the 3 range, right?
Yeah. I
think
mean, John hit it. I mean, there's the major roads. Major roads, about 57% of them are rated 3 and below. So that's over half of all the major streets. And in the minor, about 32%. So, I mean, in all, I mean, you've got a significant portion of the roads that need to be
Like
redone,
80%
like
if
half.
my math is my quick math.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a lot. So, yep.
All right.
But there are
So
some good
out of
roads. I mean, there are some good roads in the city.
right. Yeah.
There's some.
But unfortunately, those don't end up being in the neighborhoods and the houses, some of the main roads. So if you could go back and recount, Mr. Allen, the road projects that we've done over the years. I know I'm hitting you off the top of your head
Yeah.
here. Um,
Well, Sherman was the one, which was probably the most visible.
mhm.
We've had several sections of Hackley done
Now,
over the years.
Sherman was a milling and overlay for the most part.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there was some utility work underneath as far as some
Mhm.
water mains, sewer lines,
Sure.
that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Then we've done a section of Park Street.
Hmm.
Again, several sections of Hackley.
Okay.
Let me see. Then Reynolds
Reynolds
Street.
Hmm.
Several years ago, back in I think 05, I think was Fifth Street from Norton to Summit.
Right.
That's pretty much the major projects. Yeah.
And
Well, actually, Getty Street I think was several years ago. Again, I think that was kind of a collaboration with the city of Muskegon.
right.
So they did a section of Getty as well. So
Was that back in what, 2000, before 2010?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. And we, as far as I can tell from the records that I see, we haven't done a lot of crack and seal work.
No,
No.
we did. We haven't done that in a couple years.
Hmm.
And prior to that, we really didn't do much of it. There was a short period of time where they started to once the road millage came in,
Hmm.
they did start on some of the crack and seal for some of those projects. But
Hmm.
um, yeah,
And just so for our listeners and our watchers, the road millage is the 4 mills that you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
All right. And that is for local streets only, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so that doesn't address the major streets and the major arteries. It's only for pretty much the neighborhood streets, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so I guess what in summary, in total, we've got roads that are 20, 25 years old. We haven't done a lot of crack and seal. And I know you've only been in this role, heading up the public works section of the department, what, year and a half?
Yeah.
About a year and a half. And I've been here 2 years. So we are inheriting roads that are 20, 25 years old that have not had the optimal maintenance to be able to extend the lifetime. Not a lot of crack and seal, just patchwork, right? That's the majority of what we're doing. So we're facing a situation where we've got 60 miles of road, and except with the exception of Sherman, with the exception of Reynolds, with the exception of Park Street and Hackley, we're facing a situation where the life expectancy of those is kaput,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken, yep, to use a technical term. So we've got a huge undertaking in order to address trying to stay ahead of the deterioration of these roads. And what would you say, Mr. Allen, is our biggest challenge in trying to address the current condition of the roads in Muskegon Heights?
Well, there's just so much. I mean,
It is a sauna in here.
it
so-
is. Personnel, we need more bodies, more equipment, basically to try to keep up at this point. It's such a large area to cover
Mhm.
with the crew that we have. I mean,
Right. And how many folks do we have working in the public works section of the department?
well, right now we have 7.
Hmm.
We've got some seasonals. But as far as patch crews, we have 2 patch crews right now.
Hmm.
So 2 kettles, 2 patch crews. Third kettle is coming in, I believe, tomorrow.
Okay.
And so we'll have a third crew out
Mhm.
doing it. So
And you sticking to the staffing, 7, not including the seasonals. And do you remember? And I realize that you weren't heading up the department at the height of the public works. How many staff members did we have?
I'm not sure actually, but I'm sure it was probably at least twice that.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
know,
And I've heard as high as 20, 25, right? And
Yeah.
we're operating now with 7.
Yeah.
So that's a third.
Yeah, do
of the
more
staff.
with less and a lot more work.
Right.
So
And equipment wise, where are we? You mentioned equipment as being one of the limiting factors.
well, the equipment itself is aging. I mean, and just like like the roads, the equipment also needs a lot of repair, and
Mhm.
again, trying to keep up with that as well has been quite a challenge as well. So, the equipment, we've got a lot, some equipment dating back to the 90s and 80s that
Wow.
we're still keeping running.
Right.
And,
Right. And with regard to the kettles, I'm hearing that the kettles are in constant need of repair. And I think we just recently undertook doing a full reconstruction of at least one of those kettles, right?
yes.
Yeah. So the challenge is the kettle. The purpose of the kettle is to heat the material up, right?
Yeah, to keep it warm while you go out and use it.
Right.
You don't want it cooling off in the middle, the back of the truck, and then
'Cause when you-
solidifying, and then you just dump it and waste it. So yeah.
And what's Mr. Garrett? What is the optimal temperature? Do you know for hot patching for the kettles before you put it down? You have a sense of what that is like? Is it 300,
Uh,
400
I
degrees?
believe it. Yeah, it's somewhere between 3 and 4. I want to say like 325, but I don't have my trusty handy books with me. But it's well over
Okay.
300 degrees for sure.
All right. And so some of our at some point in time, our kettles were only getting up to 150 degrees.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's a problem. But you mentioned a third kettle, so we're getting those 2 kettles back up and running with the reconstruction.
Yeah.
We're bringing in a third kettle, and where's that third kettle coming from?
It's a rental. I can't remember exactly the company it's coming from, but
Okay,
it's a rental unit at this point. So
to give us
yeah.
additional capacity. How much do
Correct.
those things typically cost?
Depending on the size that you get, I mean, probably $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay, so that's a significant purchase price. So in the
Yes.
meantime, in order to create the additional capacity, we're working with leasing one.
Correct.
Okay, and so when is the hot patch going to be available so that you can start on that?
Hot patch actually started Monday.
Okay.
Again, we do have, they aren't running every single day, so they're a little weather dependent themselves. So even though we did quite a bit of patching on Monday, they were not producing anything on Tuesday, so we weren't out doing it there.
Okay.
Again, they're back producing it today, so we're out doing a bunch of patching today as well.
Okay. So you got to have the equipment, you got to have the staffing.
Mhm.
And what has prevented us over the years from having the equipment and the staffing?
Money.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have the money, you can't hire the staff. All right.
Yep.
If you don't have the money, you can't purchase the equipment, and you're constantly in repair. At some point, the cost of repair exceeds the cost of purchasing.
Correct.
But if you don't have the money to make the purchase, the next best thing is
It's a vicious cycle, unfortunately.
yes. So I understand the financial challenges associated that. One of the questions that came in is about how do residents know if or when a street is going to be patched. And so imagine that you've got an overwhelming list of streets that you need to do. How do you identify or determine? Um, how do you identify or determine which streets need to be done?
Well, it's kind of almost like plowing as well. You cover the main streets, which is the majority of the traffic.
Mhm.
So you do the mains first, and then do the locals after that.
Okay.
Again, there are major complaints that come in for some of the potholes that are excessive, and
Mhm.
we'll break away to do those occasionally. But
Those that are hazards to life and
correct.
okay.
I
All
mean,
right.
I mean, and a lot of them could be determined that a lot of people look at it and say, well, they're all that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, depending on the complaints as they come in, we will address them as well.
Okay.
But primarily do the mains and then switch over to the locals.
Okay. So you when complaints come in, you compile the list of complaints and then do a triage on those complaints of which ones that you're going to hit in what order.
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, we try to get them within a few days of the complaint coming in. We
Okay.
try to get them taken care of. again, with the temporary patches, sometimes we'll patch them and then, 2 weeks later or whatever. I mean,
It's right back
it's
there.
right back to the way it was. And,
Mhm.
and so
Yeah.
that's very frustrating for a lot of people. I know, but
I know.
it's unfortunate, but
Because
way it is.
I've actually watched patching on certain potholes, and 3 days later, I'm getting a call from a resident saying, "You never patched this hole," and I saw the cold patch going into the hole, so I know it was patched. So unfortunately, because that's a temporary fix, and sometimes temporary means days, sometimes it means weeks, but it's not a permanent fix. So
Correct.
but I think what the Ms. Sierra was getting at is, do you keep a list tracking where you have filled potholes, what streets you've hit already?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's something that we could potentially post on the city's website so that residents can go and see the list of streets that were hit and have a sense of when we're going to get to their streets.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that gets to one of the things that recommendations that came from Metro Consulting Associates about work order management system, right? So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want
that'd help us.
to talk about what the
Yeah, that would
value
help.
is of the work order management system?
Sure. Being going from 2025 to having a third of the staff and twice the work, things have aged. That certainly increases the workload with reduced staff. So, not intentionally, but sometimes things get delayed just because you had you had a list of things to do when you entered into work, and then you all of a sudden now have 10 new things and you didn't finish the 3 from yesterday. So, the work order management is just trying to get those logs somewhere so that when you do have an opportunity to come up and breathe, that you have a laundry list of things that are organized that you can systematically try to address. You have to be 10 times more organized with 2/3 of the staff, right? Because now you're
Right.
doing 4 jobs at once, and we've all
Right.
been in those scenarios before. So I think that work order management system would just help kind of keep a pulse on things, and then be able to prioritize things as high, medium, and low priority, so that we can focus on the things that really need to be addressed, and then some of the others we can get to when we can. And so that's what the work order management system would help I think the city do. It could be it's a system that runs on top of on GIS. So, there's not a huge investment when it comes to, kind of doing a short-term work order system, which can easily, things be entered into work orders and they can be created for the staff. So there's some options and some solutions out there,
Mhm.
some long-term and some short-term solutions that would kind of help manage the fact that you don't have the staff to be able to get the jobs done as efficiently as
And
you'd like.
I'll say what I liked about the recommendation that you made is the idea of taking it off of paper, putting it into an electronic format or a digital format that can then be tracked electronically. That potentially would allow us to then publish that information directly to the website to show whether it's on a graphic or a color coded map where we've hit and where we have not hit, and maybe even get to a point where there's a citizen portal where citizens can go in and report issues and then get a work order number back from reporting the issue and be able to track the completion status of that issue based on the system going into the customer portal. So that part was the part that I thought was most exciting, is creating that level of transparency, so that you're not following up and having to call people back who've filed complaints and saying, "Hey, we did this, that, and the other," giving them access to a portal where they can see where we've logged that work directly and see the progress that we're making towards addressing these issues. So that's what I'm really excited about, being able to create that customer interface and tracking system so that there's that accountability both on the citizen side, reporting it, and on the staff side, and addressing those issues. So, yeah, uh, that is exciting aspect of it. And so, what road projects do we have on the horizon now?
So right now, Delano obviously started last year and is
And
going to
that's
be
due to be
complete.
completed when?
I would say early June. They're putting in sidewalk, and as soon as we get some temperature that's up over 45
Mhm.
degrees or so consistently, they start putting down some hot mix. But that's slated to be done around June.
Okay.
So
And
that's
that
under construction right now.
and that project is being funded out of the Four Mills street millage. It's a local
Correct.
street
Yep,
being funded out of that. And
yep,
then
that's correct.
originally part of that project was supposed to be Leahy, but we
Hmm.
weren't able to get Leahy into the bidding process at the end of last year. So it is on queue to be done this year with options for Reynolds, completing that last little section of Reynolds Street that wasn't done, and the section of Maffett Street that was already compromised as part of this work that we could now, because of the proximity, get in and finish up the street on Maffett. So those are all out of the street millage. Now, what about DOT funded projects? So what's next on the hopper for that?
Well, I know that there's one. I believe it's in 2024. We've
Hmm.
got some money coming from. I think it's a federal money
Right.
for a section of Broadway. Um,
Okay.
so I believe that's 2024.
And there wasn't
Um,
wasn't there a 2023 project on Hackley? Is it?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
that's coming up in 2023. We have
Mhm.
another section of Hackley. I believe it's closer to Getty Street.
Okay.
There's a couple blocks, about 3 or 4 blocks
On
of that area.
on the east side.
Correct.
All right. Okay. And so that do we have a 2025 project already identified out of federal DOT money?
Not at this point, no.
Okay.
No.
Now you mentioned Broadway, so just so the listeners know, and I've said this before, but I always want to reiterate it. We put in an ask of the legislature to earmark, like they did for Sherman Street, $8 million to redo Broadway from end to end, from Getty to Glade. So if that comes through with the legislature, then we probably will pivot and do a different street with the federal money, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So, in terms of doing streets, what else is in the hopper? Water projects?
Yeah, we do have lead service line replacement is a mandate that has come down from the state, and so we have 20 years to replace all of our lead service lines.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's replacement from the water main to the house.
Okay.
But we're going to be replacing also some water main.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the water mains in this city can be upwards of 100 years old, and so
So we talked about
obviously
the age of our roads,
Yeah.
and we didn't talk about the age of the pipes that are underneath the road. So that's another issue.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got areas with smaller water mains that need to be replaced. And so we're going to be replacing some of the 4-inch water mains with 8-inch, tying in new services.
Mm-hmm.
And those areas will also will be again tearing up the street. So then, as part of the reconstruction, we'll get a couple of about 4 or 5 blocks of street repaired as well.
Okay.
So,
And if I'm not mistaken, that project is somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 million.
correct.
And there's about 4 or 5 projects that are included in that.
Yes.
Okay. And so what you're saying is that with those water main replacements and lead service line replacements, we will be able to reap the benefit of redoing the roads.
Correct.
Okay. And so we get a sense of where those roads are, because I know residents are looking forward to, at least if they're living on that street, to having their roads, maybe not the whole process of getting them done,
Right.
because your street's torn up, but once it's done, you got a nice new paved street. So
Correct.
where are some of those streets, if you remember?
I believe it's 8th Street from Summit to Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was a section of Leahy, if I remember.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think we might also have a project on 7th Street in that same area, side by side with
Yes.
8th Street. Some cross connections on Amsterdam, I think it was, or either. I always get
it's
Rotterdam.
a tie-in to the new mains tying into the older mains.
Mhm.
So it'll run down Amsterdam, like 1 block of Amsterdam, I think.
Okay,
So to make that tie-in.
sure. And with that project, do you remember the number of lead service lines that once we finish with that $7 million grant/loan?
I know we'll be probably around, I think 500 or 600
Yeah.
lead service lines will be replaced at that time.
The number that sticks in my head is 580. So I
Yeah.
think that's right there in the ballpark. So just so our listeners and watchers know, we were successful in applying for the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, which is a $7 million loan, of which $5 million of it is forgiven. So it becomes a grant, which leaves us with just about $2 million worth of loans. The balance of that $5 million grant, I think we're buzzing here. Of that $5 million grant, $3 million of it has to be dedicated to replacing lead service lines. So it's a strategic way of getting the water done and also addressing the roads at the same point. But that's still just a dent in the challenge.
Yes.
So, Mr. Garrett, what is the cost that we're looking at for the full reconstruction of Delano?
I believe that's $700,000.
In that range?
It may be a touch over seven, but in the $700,000 range for reconstruct.
And that is, do you recall what the distance is of that? That's from Sanford to Leahy. Is it?
Yep, to Sanford to about 0.32 miles. So just a touch over 1,600 lineal feet. So about 5 blocks.
About 5 blocks, and that's costing us $700,000. And in case our listeners don't know, with the 4 mills that we get for local streets, that brings in about $360,000. So that $360,000 would get us half of the Delano project. But because we didn't do a project the year before, we were able to put those 2 years together, come up with $720 to do the Delano Street. But every year we're only picking up $360,000, which would get us roughly 2.5, 3 blocks.
Correct.
And we've got roughly 50 miles to go.
Yeah.
275 years of paving.
There you go. Well, and I appreciate the fact you being on the call, because I know you've been tasked with part of your many projects, trying to put together a plan that we can show and share with the public on a strategic plan of addressing paving throughout the city, to kind of give folks an idea and awareness of what's on the drawing board and where we're going to be going next, based on PACER ratings, based on pipe projects, to kind of forecast out. Hopefully it won't be 250 years. Forecast out when we can get to which streets based on our current funding level. But the only way that's going to change or accelerate is if our property values go up and our 4 mills bring in more money, or we build more houses, or we sell houses. So other than that, we're still going to be in this process of chipping away and trying to go out and get additional funding and grants, like the federal grants, like the legislature funding. Those types of things are the only way that we're going to be able to accelerate that, unless our wonderful governor comes up with a plan on how they can earmark money for communities like ours that are in a structural deficit. Mm-hmm. But I want the public to know that we are working on it. We are using the resources that we have available to us in the most effective and efficient way that we can. Like you said, doing more with less. But it is underway, and the project is in capable hands with the work that Metro Consulting Associates is doing for us now, the work that Prine and Newhoff has done for us in the past, and the work that Mr. Allen and the Public Works Department is doing moving forward. So I think it is what it is, and we're making the most of what we have. But I want the residents to know that it has not been left unattended. And I know we're wrapping up here. I want to make sure that I touch on this last comment here, if I can, about whether or not it would make sense to focus on certain parts of the city. And I mean, that's a very good comment, because when we do a piece here and we do a piece there, we're spreading out the relative impact of the work that we're doing, and you never really get a sense that one area is completely done. So that's definitely part of good input for putting together that plan. And I think there's some suggestions that Ms. Aubrey made in terms of location. And so I think we're right at 3 o'clock, and I was told that we have to finish on time today. So I will circle back with you, Miss Aubrey, on your comments, and either myself or Mr. Garrett or Mr. Allen. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. If you have any additional questions or concerns, feel free to reach out, and we will get back to you or address it on subsequent shows. Thank you so much, Mr. Allen, for joining us today, taking time out. And Mr. Garrett, thank you for joining the show and rescheduling your staff meeting to be able to be available. So I welcome you and appreciate your expertise. And thank you again for committing to Muskegon Heights by setting up your office here in Muskegon Heights. And that's a wonderful commitment that I want to keep applauding, and because that's the way we need to do business. If you want to do business in Muskegon Heights, show the commitment by being present. And I appreciate you for that. So with that, I want to thank everybody for joining Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, the city manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Thank you very much, and be blessed.